other purposes is completely wrong, doesn't necessarily fall under this. And I thought the points made actually were very valid. And again, I just maybe echo the points about the same-sex marriages. There is a view out there that this could be legislated for. I too don't agree that. I don't think this is controversial at all. I think if there is a referendum, it will be overwhelmingly carried, but do we really have to go through all that? Could we not legislate for civil partnerships for gay couples? I think that is something that should be looked at. I think essentially this bill gets to the heart of really people's identity, people's right to an identity at birth, and an acknowledgement of their existence at death as well, and to have that properly registered. And these things are very important, and I'm glad to see a number of the measures taking place. But I just want to really briefly deal with two aspects of it. The first one is obviously the position of the compulsory registration of fathers' names. This is clearly necessary to underpin the rights of children under EU legislation in order to have access to their identity, and it is a very good thing. Deputy Daly made the point that he said this doesn't apply in a typical family. Well, I think that actually misses the point, that a lot of the reason why we're looking at this legislation now is that there's no such thing as a typical family in Ireland or anywhere else for that matter. The nuclear family of a male daddy, female mammy and 2.3 children doesn't exist anymore. That we have a society where 217,000 children of separated parents in the state, according to the last census, many living in new arrangements with different half-brothers, half-sisters or whatever, and we need to take and acknowledge that. But while I really welcome the fact that fathers' names are being added on and they're being given this, it doesn't actually change a whole lot for fathers, and that's a gaping deficiency in our system at the moment in terms of fathers' rights. It is a huge problem in the context of the modern family, and just having a right to have your father's name on the birth cert doesn't actually change that or give the father any extra legal rights. And I think it has to be balanced as well, because, you know, we talk about rights and responsibilities, but because of some of the actions undertaken by the government, responsible parents, separated fathers, were substantially undermined in the budget last year by the removal of the single parent tax credit and the changes in that being given over to the primary carer. Because the reality is, in the Irish court system, because it's based on the old traditional family model, 97% of separation cases deem the mother to be the primary carer, even in instances where there's 50-50 access. And we've had scenarios whereby I know of one devoted father in my own area, separated father, who'd been contributing to the upbringing of his child. His ex-partner was in another arrangement with another child from a different partner. That woman wanted to share that tax allowance, recognising that she had two children from two different fathers. It couldn't be done, and that responsible father couldn't get any benefit back. So we can talk about rights and responsibilities, but we need to do a lot more, and economic policies have to back up some of the changes that we're talking about recognising on paper. I think the other huge absence in this is one that was very well articulated by Gillian Van Turnhout in the Shannon, and that was the position of adopted people and the deficit for them in the present scenario. We know that legislation in Ireland prevents discrimination on a whole number of grounds, but actually adopted people are not specifically excluded from discrimination, and I would say that the state, by its actions, has actually defended practices of discriminating against adopted people. And, you know, while I think it's good that we're dealing with this bill, that ensuring that children born today of natural parents will have full access to their identity, the legislation does nothing for adopted people, be it the 52,000 adopted people who are now, many of whom are adults, who still don't have a legal right to trace all of the information held by the state about their identity, but also maybe some of the children as well. Now, you know, obviously adoptions in Ireland now generally take place outside the state and are generally involve very small numbers of people. Adoptions now, really since the 1990s, fall under the remit of the Hague Convention of Intercountry Adoption, and in line with UN regulation, guarantees the child's absolute right to identity of origin. Now, I think in order for us in Ireland to be compliant with both Hague and with the UN CRC and with best practice, then really Ireland should make every effort to note the adopted status on a child's birth cert. And I think that is something that we are failing to take account of this. And obviously they should have access to their original birth cert for their original country of origin, because all of the welfare experts will tell you this idea that happened to so many of the people in Ireland who were illegally adopted, who were secretly adopted, in many instances against the wishes of their mothers. We've had cases of people whose birth mothers' names were not put on their birth cert, that their names of their adoptive parents were put down as their birth parents. We've had many instances of people learning when their adopted parents died, only finding out then that they were adopted, and the tragedy and heartache that that causes people, that their whole understanding of the person they were is stood on its head. It's a crime to do that to somebody, and all of the welfare and training would show that it is best to acknowledge children's identity straight up and deal with that as normal, because there's no such thing as normal, really. Now, obviously, in the case of many of the adoptions in Ireland, it's because they're foreign-based adoptions, it's quite obvious that the parent is not the natural parent, and that assists to deal with these things. But why can't we have the adoptive status on the birth cert? I think that is a very, very good way forward. You know, Irish people being denied access to their original Irish birth cert is a terrible thing that still continues, despite our ratification of the Hague Convention. I mean, across in Britain and in other countries and so on, people have had a right to their original birth cert since the mid-70s and so on, and the roof hasn't caved in. Life has gone on. It has been fine. I think, you know, it is a little bit regrettable that when the Minister for Justice was the Minister for Children, in opposition, she made great pronouncements about the need to protect information, the need for children to have a right to their identity. But when she became Minister for Children, then a lot of the statements that she said in opposition were stood on its head, and the excuses were coming up as to why people couldn't have access to this information. It's not good enough. I mean, we are in the final months, I suppose, of this government's lifetime. In the early years of it, we were promised adoption information and tracing legislation. We still haven't even seen the heads of bill with it. I'm sick of the amount of promises that I've got on it. And our delay in this is based on a misinterpretation of the IOT versus B case, and the false emphasis being put on privacy of the mother, as if, you know, people, and we know the stories have come out since, that these women were unwilling to give up their children. In many instances, they didn't know, they didn't sign anything, so they don't want their privacy protected. And really what we're talking about protecting is state-enforced secrecy rather than privacy. If we do want to go forward in a proper way and deal fully with everybody's right to identity, well, that means everybody. And it does mean adopted people as well. Adopted people now, but particularly the adopted people who've been so sorely mistreated, the 50,000 or so, many of whom came through the Magdalen laundries and so on. So while we're discussing this, I think we need to overhaul that closed adoption system as well, in order to have a balanced playing field and ensure that indeed all children of the nation are cherished and recognised equally.